session, we'll be seeing how we can apply essential Excel functions like sum, average, max and min, count or count A, sum ifs, average if, and average is. All right, let's begin with the sum. I want you to remember that sum is the same thing as adding, is the same thing as total, or whether you want to find the subtotal of a particular section, you use the sum function. So let's say you want to find the total score of all students, which is in this case, in F column. To do so, we will utilize this formula. Equal to, it's imperative to remember that when we put a function in Excel, we must also ensure that we begin with a quality sign. So equal to the function, which is the sum function, open bracket, and we can now impute the range of our values. Now you realize that Excel directs you to impute the number 1 separated by comma, the second number separated by comma, and so on and so forth. And this is where I want to inform you that we have two types of ranges. We have the union and we have the range. The union is where we say F2, for instance, and say, comma, F3 and say, comma, and we basically separate all by a comma, just as Excel is telling us to do here. Or we just begin by inserting the range, which begins from F2 and stops at F11. So we can say F2 to, that is column F11. You see, it has covered the range here. So we say enter. It gives us the total score of all the students. So what will the average do for us? The average will calculate the average score of all the students. That is what it will do. It will first calculate the total, then divide the total by the number of occurrence. In this case, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, by 10. So what it will do now, we will begin by saying equal to average. Okay, you will have noticed that Excel is not the functions in Excel are not case sensitive. So we will say open bracket, then utilize the range as we described in the sum, that is F2 to, that is column F11. We'll close our bracket and hit enter. So it gives us 85.9. Okay. So what if we wanted to calculate the average age? Okay, we'll do same by saying equal to average, open bracket, D2 to D11, which will be the range, D2 to D11, which will be the range, open bracket, and hit enter. So the average age is 28. So let's look at the max now. For the max, we want to determine the highest score in this range. So to do that, we'll say equal to max, right? Open bracket, and then impute the range, which was from or is from F2 to F11 and close. So this will give us the highest score, which will be, I think, 95. Yes, 95. For the mean will give us the smallest score in this range, which will be equal to mean, open bracket. Our range is from F2 to F11, close bracket, and hit, and it gives us the smallest score, which is 78. Okay. So now to the count A. The count A counts the non-empty cells in the name column. So to do that, we can say equal to count A, and we have our range here, and hit enter. So the non-empty column here is 10, okay? And we can see that when we highlight in Excel to see the count, Excel gives us automatically, which is 10. So we are correct. What about count if? Count if basically counts based on a criteria, all right? So the if there gives room for the criteria to be inserted. For count if, we say equal to count if, okay? Now, the count if is a singular criteria, while the count ifs, or wherever you see the ifs, is for multiple criteria. Okay? All right, let's do this now. So we have our range now of what we want to count. Our range now is the column we want to count from. And now let's count from our gender column, okay? And to count from our gender column, we need to count a particular gender. And the gender we want to count will form our criteria. So we'll say comma, what will be our criteria? And because we want to insert text in a formula, which will be a string text, we have to ensure that we always put them in what? Quotes. So we'll say male. Ensure to insert exactly as you have it in your data set, else you will have 0 counts. So close our bracket and let's see the number of males we have. We have 5 males. So another way to do this, let's say we have gender here, and we have male, then female, okay? We had already talked about how we put in our shade, okay? Okay, so in this case, we can insert an empty cell as a criteria, or a cell containing our criterion. So let's say equal to here, count if, okay, open bracket, and we are counting the gender column. So comma to impute our criteria. We'll just go ahead and say our criteria is in J4. Then we close our bracket and say enter. You see, it still gives us 5, which is male. The difference here is that in this formula, we wrote down our criteria. So it's impossible for us to fill across columns, but here it's not impossible at all. Okay, let's see our column. Now, when we are to fill, because we didn't make our range constant, we basically had one shot of what we'll have had. So that means we'll begin this from 2 to have the normal range. So 5 each, okay? So let's call this, I think here, let's call this count, and let's call this sum of score. Okay, so we can basically say we want to check the sum of score based on these genders, so that we will know which gender have the highest or the lowest. So now this is taking us to what? To sum if. So I'm going to do the sum if here on score, so that I show you the 2 different ways we could either indicate by writing our criteria within the formula or indicating that the criteria is in a particular cell. So equal to SUMIF, open bracket. Our range is in score. Then we'll say, sorry, our range in this case for SUMIF is from where our criterion is drawn from. Our criterion is drawn from our gender. So that will be our range. We'll say comma. Then our criteria now is male, right? Open quote and say male, close quote, then comma. Our sum range now is in what? Score. Okay. We'll close our brackets and hit enter. So we have 414, right? Let me describe this again. Our range, usually in the case of SUMIFs, average if, will be from where we are drawing our criterion from, so that it will easily match the content from which we are summing or calculating our average from. Let's see it here. We say equal to SUMIF, open bracket. Our range will be from where we are drawing our criterion from. So where are we drawing our criterion from? From gender. So that will form our range. We'll say comma. So our criterion now will be in gender, which is, we are saying our gender of interest is in J4, right? So basically, let us make this a constant so that this range is constant, so that we can always remain here when we autofill. So what's our sum range? Our sum range is where we have the values to sum, which is in score, okay? And we say close bracket. So I also want to make our sum range a constant by applying the $ to the row and to the column, okay? We say, so we have 414. So if we autofill for female, we have 445. So let's see if it's going to give us similar total with this. So we say equal to sum, open bracket, 414 and 415, close bracket, and hit enter. So it gives us 859. So we are correct. So let's determine average score. Average score versus gender. So the SUMIF and the average if are basically the same. The difference in the syntax there is that the sum range becomes average range. So let's see, equal to average if, open our bracket, we see our range, our criteria, then our average range. So our range is what? Where our criteria will be drawn from, in this case, which is gender. We have to make it constant for autofilling sake. Then comma, our criteria now is female, which is in, rather male, which is in J4. Then our average range will be our score column, where we want to calculate the average per gender. Okay. All right. We close our parentheses and hit enter. So we have an average for male as 82.8, then for female as 89. The reason why we have our average different from this is because it is now being divisible by 5 and not by 10, as we had it for the total average. Okay? Because if we add this and divide by 2, say equal to sum, open bracket, this, close it, and divide by 2, we'll see that it gives us our 85.9. Okay. All right. So now I want to take our attention to, we have basically done for single criteria. Continuing on the basic formulas in Microsoft Excel, we will be looking at the ifs, right? That is how we could use more than one criteria with sum and with average. So previously, we just used the single criteria, gender. But now we want to use the criteria gender as well as the criteria age. So we will start with the male gender. So we'll say equal to sum ifs, open bracket. So here now we have to impute our sum range first. The range we are to sum, which is the score, right? Then our criteria range 1 will be where our first criteria will be pulled from. So our criteria range 1 will be our age. Okay, we insert our age range and say comma. Then we go ahead and impute our first criteria, which will be, say, greater than or equal to 28 years. Okay, then comma, we need to satisfy the condition now for our second criteria, which is going to be our second criteria range, which is our gender from E2 to E11. Then we go ahead and impute our second criteria, which is male. So we put in male like this, and we say, we close our parentheses because we're done. If we do this, our value is 335. Okay, so but with this form, you won't be able to autofill, because if you do, you are still going to have the 335. Okay, so let's see how we can make this formula autofillable. So because we already have one of the criteria here as labels, we are going to ensure that we make the range constant. Okay, our sum range must be a constant. $F to the 2, $F $11, that is making the row and the column constant. We make this constant as well. Then this is a constant. But this time we are not going to impute or hard impute our second criteria. We are going to indicate that its place in our worksheet will be our criteria, and that place is J11. So we hit enter, we still have the same value. This way, when we autofill, we are going to have the correct value for female. Let's see. Female is in J12. So we have, yes, female is in J12. So let's basically test this and see if we're right. For female, let's start with female. Let's just basically sum using this criteria. We know now that we said for females, we want them to be, it could be 28 or older. So female, this is 25, doesn't count. This is male, female doesn't count. This is age 27, 26 doesn't count. 31, yes, appropriate. Then we say comma. Then female 32, appropriate. Then we hit enter. So 182. We basically have two females that were either 28 or older. What about for males? Let's say equal to sum. So this is just to test our results, right? To show you that it's appropriate. For males, we have this guy is 30 years old. So it satisfies our age condition. This is 28, also satisfies. This is 27 and a female, 26 and a female, 29 and a male satisfies our condition. This 24 and a male doesn't, 28 and a male does. So hit enter. So you see that is Very correct. Okay. So the sum ifs and the average ifs are the same syntaxes, except that the function and the range differs when it comes to the average range, right? So let's see that. We say equal to average ifs. So we say open bracket. So you see that the average range is what changes. All other syntaxes, the arrangement of the formulas remain the same. So we can say our average range where we want to calculate our average is the score, right? Then we go ahead and say, comma, our range criteria range 1 is the age, comma, our first criteria will be that the person should be greater than or equal to 28 years. Okay. Then our second criteria range should be the gender, comma, our second criteria now will be male. So we can basically calculate the average this way. And this is simple. And our average is 83.75. Okay. So we can calculate the average for the female as well. We'll say equal to average ifs, right? Open bracket. Our average range is score. That is where we want to calculate our average. Our first criteria is the age, right? We'll say comma. And our criteria is now that the female should be greater than or equal to 28 years of age, then comma. Our second criteria will be pulled from gender, making it our second criteria range. Then the second criteria itself will be female. Okay, so we are done with this and we hit enter. So we have 91 average. Okay, that is it.